Hi, it's me with a solo episode this time of the Say Again podcast. We'll run a little bit shorter than normal and give you some of your time back, which I think is really important to do generally, but definitely at this stage in December. I would like to give you a shout out if you've been a viewer or listener of the pod this whole year. And we'll be sharing some of our stats there. It's been great to get to know some of you, to read your comments, to hear your feedback. And I would love to hear if you find any of these conversations helpful and certainly to know more about what's resonating. So today I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about what is cooking, but also share 5 tips, 5 lessons learned from the podcast and some of the deep reading this whole year. And, we talk a lot about AI, the rise of AI, the fact that this year has been dominated by so many advances when it comes to Gen AI. So many of us are using these LLMs in different ways and frankly, almost every single day for so many of our tasks. And I think one of the tips was just to be mindful of how we use these tools. Make sure we use them as tools and not become overly dependent on them. I can flag a few of the episodes where we have guests talking about this. And I think there were also those studies we referenced in some of those conversations about the, sort of early stage studies talking about the rise in cognitive decline. You'll see more of those studies. I think this week I read something, or as I was skimming the news about the sort of the challenges when it comes to the way we use really, really short form content on social media. So that is going to link to my second lesson, which is I think be mindful of what you share, but also what you consume. I think many of us have gotten much more cognizant of what we're sharing online, a little bit more up to speed when it comes to privacy, when it comes to how these platforms really work. But let's be mindful also of what we're consuming, the kind of content we're consuming, and do less of the mindless scrolling and more of the mindful consuming of content. I do think that, you might not want to sort of look at that as fear mongering when it comes to this rise in cognitive decline, but you might want to think about the tasks that you're delegating. And if you're getting worse at doing certain things because you're just like, okay, well, I'll let ChatGPT do my thinking for me. It's fantastic to use to supplement. It's fantastic to help with strategy, with social media posts and whatnot. I grant you. And of course, for marketing, it's never been easier to set up a small business thanks to the tech advances and thanks to these LLMs, which are so helpful. But I think we do have to exercise some caution in how we use these tools. Let me know if you agree or disagree and some of the tips that you might have that you'd like to share with this Say Again podcast community. That would be great to hear. One of the other tips, and this is now tip 3, that I have been hearing, and it's really kind of been landing, I guess, more and more this year, is about the importance of practicing gratitude. I definitely am one of those people who used to use the hashtag blessed and gratitude with some amount of skepticism and some amount of sort of just being snarky about the whole thing. But this past year, it's really come home to me that it's important to practice gratitude. And apparently there are studies showing the importance and the sort of impact it has on our health. I link to a couple of those in the show notes in case you find that interesting as further reading. But we've also had some of our guests talking about it, and certainly something that we like to ask them to reflect on, things that they're grateful for. And you might not be surprised to know this, but apparently practicing gratitude consciously has been shown to rewire our brains. I'm looking at my notes that I've made here. Rewire our brains, boosting, of course, the feel-good chemicals, and that includes dopamine. Dopamine hits are, of course, what we're getting from social media as well. But let's do this the old-fashioned way and in a more sustainable way. Practicing gratitude mindfully can also help us reduce our stress. It can, lead to better sleep, and it can also enhance health. So I'm going to drop a couple of links to those pieces you can read and decide for yourself. But I think it's a pretty good tip to practice in general, especially given the shit show that is the world around us on a daily basis. So I've been trying to be more mindful of practicing gratitude. I have been given shout outs as well myself. And I love listening to what people say that they're grateful for. And I think we can also do this as a quiet exercise. Everything does not have to be performed for social media. See point number 2, being mindful of what we share and consume. Okay, tip number 4 for me would be reclaiming our attention spans. I don't know if you can read my terrible handwriting, but let's reclaim our attention spans. Like many of us, I had heard that we all have the attention spans now of a goldfish, or our attention spans are less than a goldfish. And when I was doing research for a talk a few months ago, I read that was completely not a true study at all. It's just one of those things that just got quoted and quoted and quoted, but was not based in anything. And I think we should be a little bit more thoughtful, let's say, because I've said mindful 20 times. We should be a bit more thoughtful about what we're paying attention to. We should be able to focus, and we should be able to think before scrolling, as I was saying. We should be able to read more, go analog. I will say that I was kind of testing myself out as someone who used to be a huge reader and then kind of found that I was reading less and less. And this year, I think I crossed about 70 odd books, and I'm feeling quite happy, almost back to as good as it ever gets, but especially as an adult. But I do think it's more than possible to reclaim your attention span, because it does tie into this overall message of being more mindful of what we're doing with our time. Many of us are reading constantly, right? On the go, on your phones, you're reading, snippets, captions, videos, but just taking your mind off that phone, sometimes going for a mini digital detox, going offline. I've been hearing more people talking about going analog, and maybe 2026 is a year we decide to go more and more analog. I think we do need to limit our time on social media. I think you're seeing a lot of younger people already doing this, according to the articles I've been seeing. But there is this need to also be able to focus, right? Focus and do the deep work you need to do. And I'm not just talking about the sort of office work that you need to do, but to do some of the thinking for yourself. Let's go back to having our own opinions. Let's go back to having informed opinions. Let's go back to learning, reading for joy, reading for pleasure. And I will link to, I think, some tips on this aspect of sort of learning to focus and concentrate again, because many of us have felt this, that there's more and more of a fragmented attention span. You're doing something and you're actually thinking about something else, or you're scrolling while you're watching. How many of us have heard these brands talk about the second or third screen experience? Well, none of that's really great for your brain. I'm just mota, like upar se I'm saying, like, I think none of that is really actually fantastic for your brain. So let's talk about being more mindful. Let's talk about learning to get our attention span, or as I say, hijack your attention span back, learn to focus more. And one of the basic tips is this quote, "Be here now," unquote. So, when you're talking to someone and you find your mind drifting, just remind yourself to be here now, come back into the present. I'm not saying you have to go in for this full mindfulness and that whole industry that seems to have cropped up, but I am saying it is helpful. I think it's good for us. And I think we do want to stay sharp given the constant onslaught and deluge of short form, long form content, micro content. I don't understand what is going on half the time now. And I think some of you are on the same boat as me. Let's learn to focus again. Let's take at least some time for ourselves, focus on what we want to do. And that might be creating, that might be writing, that might be reading, that might be just taking time out with your kids, with your family, with your dog, taking time to go out for a walk with a mask if you're in Delhi, for sure, please. But apparently you can get your focus back. You'll see some sort of improvement within a few days to a few weeks. So this article is saying, perhaps 4 to 6 weeks if you practice this. But try that quote unquote "be here now" strategy and tell me how you go. Oh, and finally, part of this is this really fascinating thing that I read many, many years ago, and I reread it today before this chat that we're having, is that you can actually set aside time to worry. Now, some of us do have this tendency to get, lost in our heads. Some of us do stress and really sweat the small stuff. This can be helpful. And this is not, for you if you've been diagnosed with, or you think you might have a diagnosable condition. But this is for you if you think that, you just seem to get hassled about things. It can be helpful to set aside specific time to worry. I've tried this a couple of times now before traveling, and I was just really getting super hassled and telling myself, well, actually, I'm not going to worry about this till Wednesday, and I'm going to think about this on at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. And I actually did this, and I realized that, it really calms that sort of ambient anxiety, or that sort of low-key background anxiety that can really build up. Set aside time to worry. It's kind of linked to reclaiming your attention span and focusing and being here now. But let me know if that tip helps you, and if any of you use that, because I do find this to be something where we can take a little bit of control back. And the final one really is to read more and read better. Very much linked to this idea of going analog, very much linked to this idea of deciding for ourselves what we want to read, not just relying on algorithms. And that, the problem with that is it's very, very useful, of course, to some extent, to keep getting more of what you want and having an algo kind of tell you, well, you like this, and so you will probably like this, and giving you more of what you want. But there is something amazing about serendipity as well. And there is something about going outside our comfort zones and not knowing what we don't know. So, that could be walking into a bookstore and having, sort of line of sight on books that you might not have thought that you would be interested in, but that turn out to be the best read you've ever had. That might be something like a category or genre that you're not really normally interested in, but is just really well written, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's fiction. Again, I'm category agnostic, but I do think we need to exercise a little bit more of our own agency and pay attention to things and learn and just go back to enjoying the sort of wonder that can come with learning serendipitously or finding things serendipitously, not just things that are fed to us because we've already indicated that we want to consume that kind of content. So read more and read better. We actually will have an offering on this front for 2026 via a new club, a new membership. So I hope some of you will check it out, especially as we're close to hitting 10,000 subscribers. So yay, thank you, YouTubers. Thank you to those on other platforms as well. But do check out the membership in case you're interested. We're going to put together some curated books coming out with more long form and thoughtful content for you. I hope you will enjoy that. And I hope you will join me in taking some downtime this December, kind of taking time to take stock of what's happened this year and what we're looking forward to in the next year. Thank you so much for watching or listening. And I hope you continue to tune into the Say Again podcast when we resume. Do check out some of the links in the show notes and let us know what you make of them.